When I listen to Audible, I'm not cooking dinner for one. I'm on horseback, galloping across the Scottish moors towards my one true love. There, through the mist, I see my beloved, kilt flapping in the breeze. The fibers of his shirt struggle against his bulging muscles as he takes me from my horse and... my frittata!
Go to audible.com/start trial and your first download is free. Audible. Stories that surround you.
This is the Cover32 Seahawks Show.
Throw down the middle, Doug Baldwin at the 30, 25-20, 15-10-5. Touchdown, Seahawks!
With your host, Kevin Daggett.
Cam Chancellor with the big hit. Who else would it be but Cam?
And Lee Vowell.
Intercepted! Getting underneath it is Earl Thomas.
Just one step away from CenturyLink Field.
He scrambles upfield, he's hit, he's dropped. Michael Bennett is there to make the sack.
The official podcast of the Cover32 Seahawks website.
Thomas rolls, drags Xavier Rhodes across the goal line, and the Seahawks are on the board.
Go Hawks!
Third down and 4 from the 9. Seattle leading 13-10. Wilson out of the shotgun, Procise. Curse is slotted on the left side. Lockett wide to the near side. Russell looking. Russell scrambling. Pump faking. Still looking. Now he spins out. He's coming to the right. Still looking for somebody to open up. Pump fake. He throws to the end zone. It's a touchdown! Touchdown Seahawks to Tyler Lockett, who just kept moving around. Ryan Russell was chasing Russell Wilson all over the backfield. A 9-yard touchdown pass. The Seahawks finally pay it off.
And that was a crazy play. So welcome to the Cover32 Seahawks Show with Kevin Daggett and Lee Vowell. You can hear this show on the Happy Hour Network live and on podcast at cover32.com, of course, I-95 Sports Network, iHeartRadio, and iTunes. Today our guests, we have a plethora of guests, and we're happy to say that. Today our guests will be David Stobbe of Fansided's Seahawks site, 12th Man Rising, Stephen Cohen of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, which is what everybody knows as Seattle PI, and of course our weekly segment with Tim Weaver, managing editor of Cover32 Seahawks site. This week, Tim will be previewing the Seahawks defense for the upcoming season. Last week we talked offense. This week we'll talk defense. It'll be a great conversation because the Seahawks always have a good defense. So I'm Lee. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little bit tired tonight. I don't know why, but hey, sometimes that happens when you get as old as I am.
That's not true.
Take those early evening naps.
So, for those of you who don't know, Kevin actually is 257 years old. He used to be. No, I have no idea. He's slightly younger than I am, just to catch up to date. So, the Seahawks did reduce their roster to 75 players. They made some moves. George Farmer, not a surprise, he's gone. Trovon Reed, he's gone. Josh Shirley, but some players that are gone who might be a little bit of a surprise. Brandon Browner, who I hate to mention because I know Kevin is a huge fan. Patrick Lewis, who I thought did a bang-up job at center last year. And Christian Sicoli, guard, he also is no longer with the team. Of course, all those players really, maybe not Browner, he might be picked up by another team, but all those players may be able to come back to the practice squad. We'll have to see how that goes. So any surprises among the roster cuts for you so far today, Kevin?
No, even though I'm a big Brandon Browner fan, I'm not surprised by the cut. I kind of saw it coming. It doesn't make me happy, and I understand why they had to cut him the first time, and I understand why they cut him this time. I'm just a fan of his. The other one that I guess it didn't really surprise me, but Kevin Smith, he's made a couple runs at this team, and I just don't know if he's ever going to make it in the NFL. But they cut him. The Lewis, did they have somebody better to back up Britt as center? I guess I don't know. I mean, I don't. He didn't do. I guess he didn't do a real good job last year, but who's backup center is Joey Hunt. I mean, I don't know what they're going to.
I mean, I guess the thing to say about Hunt though is at least he was maybe. This is a weird one, but maybe they feel like he had more rapport, obviously, with Trayvon Boykin, and therefore Boykin is probably going to be the backup quarterback, and maybe they feel like, you know, that chemistry, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I thought Patrick Lewis, you know, once he was inserted as a center last year, I thought the Seahawks offensive line, and maybe it was coincidental, but I thought that the Seahawks offensive line did a whole lot better, you know, once he was the center and was inserted in that role. I'm just kind of surprised, like you pointed out, who's the backup center to Britt. I thought Patrick Lewis, is he an all-pro center? Is he Max Unger? No, but he's pretty good. So, I mean, at least the role he fit with the Seahawks. So, yeah, that was a kind of surprise. Definitely he'll be picked up by another team, and so will probably Browner. You know, we still have more cuts to go. We're at 75, so really the harder cuts almost now. I guess I wasn't surprised by Browner being cut because of the fact that, you know, in the preseason game, especially against the Cowboys, he was really the third string safety. I can't see the Seahawks being that kind of team who feels like we need to hide this guy to expand upon once the regular season starts what's going to happen. So, you know, I know you're a Browner fan. I mean, he was great when he was a Seahawk. You mentioned it may not have surprised you, but, you know, it's still kind of who's going to cover the tight ends, I guess, is my question. Is Kelsey McRae going to cover the tight ends at this point?
I guess so. I mean, Cam Chancellor and, you know, nobody covered him last year pretty much. I did see that I don't think the Hawks play the Bengals this year, but Tyler Eifert's out. Boy, he had a career game against the Seahawks last year, but I don't know who's going to cover him. Hopefully the linebackers can step up, and I guess Cam Chancellor, but you know, I don't know that Browner was the guy for the job either. I think they had a history with him, and they brought him in because he's a big dude, and maybe we could move him from the outside to the inside, and he could hit somebody, but I just don't know that he really had a spot on this team, but hopefully he'll get picked up by somebody else. And if not, you know, maybe we'll come back to the practice squad and you know, have some opportunity to play. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, another player that's kind of been up and down is Christian Michael. Of course, he's had a phenomenal preseason. You know, first show we did of this season, it was more like a matter of, G. Scott tweeted out that Christian Michael might be the starter, and we were both like, really? But now at this point, I mean, he's a legitimate guy to be the starter of this team going into regular season game 1, right?
I think he is, especially with Rawls not playing any so far. And, you know, do you want to throw him in there right away and let him get banged up? And you know, I've got a little bit of concern about that. I mean, Rawls he's not going to be game ready come week 1, I don't think. I mean, with not playing any preseason, any live action against other teams, that's a bit of a concern. And we saw what that did with Chancellor last year. It took him a little while to get in the swing of things. So it is nice to see Christian Michael playing well. So if he does start, we do have a starting running back.
Yeah, I think the other concern there is not only is, you know, compared to Cam Chancellor, who's played regular season games for a multiple of years, Rawls has missed a lot of time. I mean, it's not just that he's missed the preseason. He missed a lot of time at the end of the regular season last year when he was really coming on. So I guess my worry there would be, do we have too much faith in Thomas Rawls? He was great last year once Marshawn went out, but do we have too much faith in what he can do? And, you know, if Christian Michael, who was, you know, good at the end of last season, and he's been great in the preseason, but, you know, again, no offense to Christian Michael, hopefully he'll be great in the regular season. Dak Prescott has also been great with the Cowboys, and now he's going to be the starter for the regular season for a long time. And so, you know, is Christian Michael's preseason, based on his 8.3 average against the Cowboys, and he's had a great preseason, does that really translate to the regular season, do you think?
Time will tell, I guess. I mean, I hope it does. And I think you watch him play. His fundamentals seem to be there. I mean, like you mentioned last week, he switches the ball from that one hand to the other when he has to, and when he comes in, it looks like there's contact coming. He covers the ball with both hands, and he looks like a lot of the fundamentals, or he's playing with a lot of fundamentals. And another thing about Rawls is coming off that injury. The Seahawks are a run-first offense, and they put a lot of demands on the running backs, and so if Rawls is going to be out there, he's going to get tackled a lot, and we still don't know what he's going to, how that ankle is going to hold up, or if it's going to be any other injuries, and I hope that he's not injury prone, but you just never know. I mean, look at Paul Richardson. He's been injured quite a bit. But.
Yeah, very true, Paul Richardson. And I think he and Lockett might have a huge season, but a guy who would know about that possibly is David Stobbe. So we now welcome David Stobbe to the show. David is a staff writer at Fansided's 12th Man Rising. David has been on before and is always great. So thanks for being on again.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Good.
Hey, David, with some of the roster cuts today, were you surprised with anybody who's still on the team, or you think there's anybody who you might think is still on the team that's not going to make it past the 75, or that shouldn't have made it past the 75?
Just a few of the tight ends, Clayton Etchard and Joe Summers. I think they're just keeping those guys on because they need extra numbers for the last game. And a few of I'm excited that Tremaine Pope is still, I think I'm saying his first name right, Pope, the short little running back. I'm excited that he made it past. And then Kenny Lawler's 7th-round pick, or I'm interested to see if he's actually going to make it onto the 53-man or if he's going to have to stick on the practice roster this year.
What were some of your biggest takeaways from that third preseason game against the Cowboys?
I think it was nice to see the offense get a bit of a flow, have a few nice drives, and offensive line still protecting pretty well. So that was nice, but it was just nice to see Russell Wilson throw that touchdown pass to Lockett and then the other one to Paul Richardson. And then on defense, the second-string defense looked a lot better with Brock Coyle in there. First-string defense gave up too many runs to Ezekiel Elliott. But, yeah, main thing, offense, first-team offense looked a lot better.
Yeah, and you mentioned Paul Richardson, who, of course, had the great season of 1 catch and 40 yards last season. And he showed a lot of potential the season before last. So, with Richardson coming back, if he can stay healthy, a healthy Lockett, hopefully, and a healthy Baldwin, I mean, how good can this receiving core be?
I think it's really exciting. Baldwin's said it in an interview a couple of days ago that he said it's the deepest wide receiver group that he's been a part of. And when you got that your top 4 is Baldwin, Lockett, Richardson, Curse, and then that 5th spot's up for grabs still. It's pretty deep. You got speed, you got quickness. Curse, you got the clutch factor, kind of inconsistent, but he comes up clutch. And that 5th receiver going to be probably between Case and Williams or Douglas McNeil, maybe Kenny Lawler, or a guy from Wisconsin, McAvoy. So it's deep, lots of talent.
Yeah, and moving over to the tight end position, which hopefully is going to be a position of strength. Jimmy Graham obviously went out fairly early last year. Luke Wilson is the guy who's had his moments, and Nick Vanette now is a great blocker in Ohio State, and he showed they could catch some passes. So just about the tight end position, do you feel that could be a position of strength, and how good can Jimmy Graham be in this offense?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a position of strength. And just a matter of fact, if Jimmy Graham can come back healthy, apparently he looked good in preseason, the warm-ups last game, so I think they're still counting on him to come back week 1. But you got Graham, you got Luke Wilson, who's supposedly improved on his blocking. You got Vanette, and then you got Brandon Williams, who's looked good too as a blocking tight end, and he can catch passes too. So you got 4 really good tight ends. I don't know how many they're going to keep, but and all of them can catch passes. You got Graham, who's basically a receiver, and Wilson as well. So a lot of dangerous threats for Russell Wilson to throw to.
Yeah, and moving over to running backs a little bit, Christian Michael, of course, has had a huge preseason. How surprised are you by where Christian Michael was last year at this time, and how his performance at the end of last season and this preseason, where he is last year compared to this year?
Yeah, it's exciting. When I think with the hype with him during training camp and preseason, you always take it with a grain of salt, but he's been able to do it consistently week 1, week 2, week 3 in preseason, and coaches keep singing his praises that he's more consistent, he's working hard, he's in the playbook, and it's his contract season. So if Rawls can come back healthy, which he should, you got Rawls and Michael, 1-2 punch, which should be a pretty dangerous tandem.
And again, we're talking to David Stobbe of 12th Man Rising. We really appreciate you being on. So Frank Clark obviously has been moved around a lot on the defensive line. He appears to be the breakout candidate on that defensive line this year. Hopefully he will be. You know, he has a potential for double-digit sacks and so on and so forth. What do you think the potential is for Frank Clark, and how does he improve that defensive line?
Yeah, I don't think he has a ceiling. He has so much potential. I think he's just improved on being more consistent with his technique and becoming a better edge rusher, because he rushed a lot inside last season. But I think he's just become more consistent, more focused, and he's just going to continue to improve each week. So he can, and he's so versatile. You can use him on the edge. You can use him inside. He can stand up and rush. You probably play some linebacker too if you ask him. So when you have Bennett and you got Cliff Averill, and you can bring in Frank Clark, it's pretty dangerous.
And David, that defensive backfield's looking pretty strong this year, even though they cut my guy Brandon Browner from the original Legion of Boom this week. How do you think that the Legion of Boom this year is going to match up against that Super Bowl team?
Sherman has looked good, of course, and I think Deshaun Shedd's going to win that outside corner spot. But I think I've been a little disappointed with Harold Simon in preseason. He's looked solid but kind of inconsistent, and Jeremy Lane has given up some passes. So there's definitely the potential. They're really deep too. Ty Smith and Marcus Burley's fighting for a spot. And then obviously you have Thomas and Chancellor and Kelsey McCray. He's been outstanding. He has a third safety, so he probably bumped out Brandon Browner with his incredible play. So you got Kelsey McCray and Tyus Powell. So those are a lot of names, which shows how deep they are. But it's just like it's the outside corner spot that's got to be held down, so either by Shedd or Jeremy Lane. So, but yeah, lots of talent again.
Yeah, Lee and I were talking a little earlier about Thomas Rawls, and kind of there's some real high expectations of him coming into this year, and thank goodness Christian Michael's playing well too, so we might have 2 really good running backs. What do you think of the expectations everybody's putting on Rawls? Do you think that the expectations are too high, or you think they're reasonable?
I think they might be a little bit too high. You have to. He played outstanding in his. I don't know how many starts he actually. Maybe 7 starts or something, and he hit the hole so hard and kind of a little beast mode. So, but yeah, it was 1 year. It was half a season. And obviously he has there's super high expectations for him, but I think you got to make sure he comes back healthy and got to see him play again. It's got to be consistent week 1, week 2, week 3. So I think I'm waiting on my expectations till he actually gets back on the field and we see him in action. But like you said, it's nice that Christian Michael has been playing so well. So you have that insurance and you have a deep running back, a bunch of rookies that can come in and contribute. But I think Rawls will play just like he did last year.
What's your biggest concern about this team heading into the season?
Offensive line.
Shocking.
Yeah. Offensive line. Yeah, I think I like the interior pass protectors. Actually, very surprising with Justin Britt that he's been able to play so well. but Bradley Saul at left tackle pretty much seems like he's won the starting job already. And then Gilliam and Webb are fighting for the right tackle spot. So I think that's the biggest issue with this team is can the offensive line protect Russell Wilson from week one? Because we saw what happened last year, and that was just a disaster. So I think we got to see it week one, week two, see if they can protect Wilson, see if they can run block. But if they can do that, this team is going to be dangerous, especially on offense.
Now, being the resident Canadian on the show right now, who is the best Canadian on the Seahawks roster?
Ooh, that's a tough one. John Ryan's been playing outstanding in preseason, and 60-yard punts right after the other, and he can catch a few passes. You caught one on the sideline, and then you got Luke Wilson. Yeah, that was nice. And Luke Wilson, I'm hoping he has a big season. This is contract year, I believe, and if he can add to his receiving threat with some good blocking. So I'm going to give it to John Ryan.
Good choice. That'd be mine, too. And he just got married, too. So.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
And what should we expect to see in this final preseason game coming up? Anything particular?
I'm going to watch for the backup running backs with C.J. Prosise, Alex Collins, and Tremaine Pope, just to see, especially if Prosise and Collins can stay healthy. They'll probably get a lot of touches that game. See if, especially Prosise. He looked explosive in the few snaps that he took in week 3. I'm just seeing if he can stay healthy and can contribute. And then I just look at the back few for the 5th spot for receiver, Cason Williams and McNeil. See who's going to win that spot. And then on defense, I usually look at the defensive line, see if they have the depth, pass rushers, Quentin Jefferson, and I don't know, maybe Ryan Robinson, see if they can make the team and provide some of those pass rushers that Seahawks love to rotate in.
Well, David, as before, you've been great. Will you let people know where you can be found on social media?
Yeah, definitely. On Twitter, you can find me at David_Seahawks, and that's where I do most of my posting for everything Seahawks. And you can also find me on 12th Man Rising. That's where I write, staff writer, so just on the website there, you can find some of my stuff.
Sounds great. We'd love to have you on again during the regular season if you can make it, but otherwise, go Seahawks and enjoy preseason game 4 on Thursday.
Thank you guys as well. I'd love to be back on. Always a pleasure talking to you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
So yeah, David's always great. I mean, all the 12th Man Rising guys are just great, and girls, because Dana's been on before, and she's been fantastic as well. We're always fortunate to have any of those people on if you're listening and you want to be on the show. No, I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, those David and Keith and Dana have all been great from 12th Man Rising, and I think we're lucky to have the group we have at Cover32 Seahawks side as well. So, bringing it down a notch, it doesn't have anything to do with the Seahawks per se, but how bad do you feel for the Vikings? It looks like Teddy Bridgewater's going to be out for a long period of time. Or are you aware of this?
Yeah, I heard about that, but I tell you what, I still feel bad for the Vikings losing that game against the Seahawks last year, because the Seahawks did not win that game. In case anybody thinks they did, but I still feel sorry for them in that game.
Yeah, I remember watching the end of that game, and I don't mean to laugh because the Vikings played better in that game, honestly, than the Seahawks did. But it got to that point, and I was watching it, and I was thinking, well, this is a gimme field goal. This guy's going to make it this end of the season. How are we going to talk about it on the Seahawks show? And then he missed it, and it was just like I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, are you serious? This is unbelievable. But I think the Vikings are one of those teams in the NFC, like the Packers, like the Cardinals. It's one of those teams that they really could make a deep run if everybody's healthy. And it just from the reports I've seen, it looks like Bridgewater might be out for a really long period of time. Maybe he even misses a season. Of course, it's too early to tell, but the Vikings have so much talent, yet they really don't have a backup quarterback. They could win a few games with a backup quarterback. And if Adrian Peterson obviously was healthy last season, but, he hasn't always been healthy. The Vikings fans, which I'm not one of, but I don't dislike the Vikings. I got to feel bad for them because it's one of those things where it's like you go from thinking, based on last year and the talent we have, especially on defense, we can make a deep run. Maybe we're the new Seahawks, but now they lose Bridgewater for an extended period of time. I mean, that's one of those teams you look at in the NFC thinking, well, the Seahawks need to beat this team to probably get to the Super Bowl. It may not be that way this year, right?
No, and that's the thing is, I mean, I used to be a Vikings fan as a kid, or the Maud Rashad and Fran Tarkenton and those guys, but you think about your quarterback going down. Romo goes down, he's out. Bridgewater possibly out, and you just think, what if that was my team? What if my quarterback goes out? It's like, and you don't even want to think about it, And you got to feel for those fans, even if you don't like the team. You got to feel for the fans. And like you said, the Vikings had a good season last year, and it's funny that dude missed that field goal. And I was a kicker in high school, and I had some of my high school buddies texting me and emailing me, man, you could have hit that kick. It's like, yeah. And he should have too.
Right, yeah. And he would have almost any other day of his life. It just so happened that he missed. That game was so weird anyway, just because it was so cold. I mean, it wasn't even like the outcome. The outcome was what it was, but if it had been played under almost any other warmer condition, who knows how the game would have gone. It came down to that, but it's not the kicker's fault. It was just the weather was so horrible. And I'm not blaming on the weather. He's a professional kicker, and he should have made that. But still, I still felt bad for him as a human being. And I guess I kind of feel bad for the Vikings fans. Maybe they'll be fine. But losing Bridgewater, and, a part of me was thinking, well, Bridgewater wasn't that great in the playoffs. And he honestly, to lack of a better word, he looked shook against the Seahawks in the regular season. Like he looked like he was, he didn't know what to do against the Seahawks in the regular season. They had his number. He was afraid to throw the ball. He was afraid to throw it deep. And they were missing some key people, obviously. But Bridgewater is not necessarily a guy you look and think, oh man, it's Tom Brady. If he's not with the team, the Seahawks have an excellent chance to win the game. But, losing Bridgewater is going to affect that team. And he's going into his third season. It will be interesting to see how they do. Now, that said, of course, if Russell Wilson were to get injured, there's been a lot of talk on, for instance, 710 ESPN Seattle about how either the Seahawks would make the playoffs even with a backup quarterback because they have enough talent everywhere else, or they would definitely not make the playoffs. Did you see enough from Boykin? And we might see a whole lot of Boykin in preseason game 4, or it could be that we don't see a whole lot of Boykin and we see a lot of Jake Heap or whatever because they don't want Boykin to get hurt because he's the backup. But have you seen enough from Boykin? Yeah, he threw the interception at the end of the game 2, and he made that, honestly incredible run in game 3 to score the touchdown. Have you seen enough from Boykin in the preseason to have the hopes that if Russell Wilson unfortunately were to get injured, the Seahawks could still make the playoffs this year?
No, I don't think so. Preseason is a whole different ball game than regular season, and he's coming straight out of college, and he threw a lot in college, but I just don't know that he's one of these. And he may be. Who knows? You just never know about these guys, but and this was a weird year for quarterbacks. I still don't understand those two guys going as high as they did, but I don't know. It's just so hard to predict with the rookie quarterback. If he did go in there, you look at the Denver team. Well, Brock Osweiler went in there and held his own, and Peyton Manning didn't have that great of a year, and that was just a great example of defense wins championships. is this defense good enough this year to get them in the playoffs if Russell Wilson is out? I don't know. I'd like to think so because they've been good, for the last few years. But then again, what's everybody's biggest concern this year? The offensive line. And
right.
if your offensive line's not good, obviously we hope it is. But if your offensive line's not good, that's not going to give your rookie quarterback any confidence if he has to come in and win games. So there's just a lot of factors that are going on if Russell Wilson does go down. And, God, we talk about it every show, but God forbid he doesn't.
Yeah, maybe if we keep talking about it, he'll never be injured and play for the Seahawks for 20 years. So,
yeah, it's that old phrase. It's that old phrase. Worrying. When people talk about worrying gives you something to do, but it gets you nowhere.
Exactly, that's very true. So, Kevin, you want to tell us a little bit about our next awesome guest? He's not even a guest. He runs the show. He runs the Seahawks website on Cover32. So, tell us a little bit about Tim Weaver.
Yeah, he actually does. He runs the show. He's the star of the show. Tim Weaver, he is the editor of Cover32 Seahawks site, and we have him on every week, and we're going to continue to have him on during the season, football season. This week we're going to talk about the defense heading into the regular season. Tim, how are you doing this week?
I feel great. Anytime we win, the week is better, the sun is brighter, the grass is greener. It's all good.
Awesome. Now, before we get into the defense, what were some of your biggest takeaways from that preseason game against the Cowboys?
Well, I was watching the line play a lot. What concerned me most was seeing Dallas's offensive line push us around the first-string defenders anyway. The first quarter, I think David mentioned, but Ezekiel Elliott had a really good game. I think he's going to be a special player. I think kind of like Matt Forte on steroids, can do everything well, but Ezekiel Elliott can do it all just a little bit better. I think he's going to be a really special player. And seeing him go head-to-head with Cam Chancellor was just awesome. I think that's the best thing I've seen so far in preseason in all the games I've seen. But they weren't able to get too much pressure on Dak Prescott, who looks fantastic so far. I got him on my fantasy team. As soon as Romo went down, he was still available. I took it. I'm going to run with it. I really like to see them put some more pressure on this week against the Raiders, who also have a really good offensive line. I think you can argue they have the best line in the AFC, whereas the Cowboys have the best line overall. Pretty close between those two, actually. Raiders upgraded with Colecchio Sameli now at guard, so they're pretty stacked there. I'd like to see them do a better job stuffing the run, but otherwise I think it was a pretty good performance.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was kind of ironic that the Cowboys do have one of the best offensive lines in the league, yet Romo went down and he's out. What's your biggest worry about the defense as a whole this season?
I really only have one this year. We changed over two positions. One at nose tackle, Brandon Meebane's gone. Signed with the Chargers. Really happy that he got that kind of deal at his age. They may regret it, but more power to him. I think the Seahawks actually may have upgraded there. They brought in two draft picks. One is Jaron Reed out of Alabama. Really surprised he fell to them in the second round. It's a great class for defensive tackles, supposedly. That was like the deepest position this year in the draft, and the Seahawks got a really good one. But they also used another pick later on Quentin Jefferson, who's kind of surprised everybody with how well he's played. So they may be even deeper at DT this year as opposed to last year. But the one that really stands out to me is Bruce Irvin's spot, the Sam linebacker. We heard about this competition we were going to have. Mike Morgan is expected to do it, but Cassius Morris and Eric Pinkins are supposed to be in his face. Pete Carroll likes to talk about competition. It never really materialized, so it looks like Morgan's just kind of be given that position, which doesn't always work out too well. You want to see a little bit more competition, but, as far as worries go, just the one spot where Bruce Irvin used to be on first and second down, because we know Frank Clark's going to take over that Leo role that he used to fill on third down in those big passing situations. But if they can just get that one spot, Irvin's thing locked down, the defense is almost perfect. 11 for 11. I'll take 10 for 11. That's not too bad either.
And you've already hit on a couple of the questions we have. The next one is, of course, about Frank Clark. He's being moved around a lot on the defensive line in the hopes of getting the best out of his ability. What's his potential? How good can he be?
I think he can be the next Michael Bennett. I think that's exactly what they had in mind. Michael Bennett has been complaining about his contract since he signed it. The ink wasn't even dry, and people wonder, is this going to drag out? He's been complaining for 2.5 years now. It's going to be fine. He's going to play. He's going to show up. He's not happy, but he's going to show up, unlike some people last year at the start. But he showed up, doesn't like his deal. He's going to work. He's going to deal with it, and he'll eventually get paid. Who knows? Maybe they can't sign him. Right now, I think he can make $20 million a year. If he plays out the remainder of his contract, there's a good chance he can make $20 million a year. And that's the kind of player that Frank Clark can be. He can be a superstar defensive end. He can earn $100 million contracts down the line. There's almost nothing he can't do. He has unlimited potential. Has a lot of room to grow, but unlimited potential.
Yeah, and, if Michael Bennett decides he doesn't want to play football anymore, talking about $20 million a fight, maybe Floyd Mayweather is his manager. You never know how that's going to go because he likes to fight this preseason. That's kind of interesting. But, again, we're talking to Tim Weaver, the editor of Cover32 Seahawks side. It's almost college football season, so I didn't want to say the Ohio State, so I went with the editor. Hopefully that's okay. So, what do you think about, and you've already hit on this a little bit, about the depth of the defensive line. I mean, Tony McDaniel's probably going to be back. Reuben is on the team. Jerron Reed, he's had some injury issues, but, you worry about the linebackers, but how deep can this defensive line be?
It can't possibly be deep enough. I think that was the one lesson of Super Bowl 49 is you just cannot have enough pass rushers. You cannot have enough guys who can get pressure up front. That game really turned around. Yes, they could have and should have won it, and I don't even want to talk about it. They'll slant. But where that game really turned is when Cliff Averill went down. Tom Brady suddenly had time to work those crossing routes. He got into a rhythm, and you can tell, oh, God, Tom Brady is in a rhythm. What are we going to do now? And that was where that game turned in the fourth quarter, I think. So that was the lesson they learned, that you cannot possibly have enough depth on the defensive line. And I really like the stuff that they've done. Tony McDaniel is just massive. He's so much bigger than all the other Seahawks linemen. He's the kind of guy who can block field goals. He can get pressure up front. He can stuff the run. He can do lots of different things. And, again, like I mentioned, the 2 DT picks they got this year, along with the depth that they have at defensive end, which is really special. Cassius Marsh, I think, is pretty underrated. Frank Clark's going to be a superstar, and they're playing behind two of the best in Averill and Bennett. So I feel great about that defensive line. That's kind of the way they were in 2013. You just knew that everyone you cycled in, it didn't matter who got gassed, they were going to bring in, they were going to come after you, kind of like that. So I'm looking forward to see them again.
And Tim, you mentioned the linebackers. You talked about K.J. Wright and Bobby Wagner being pretty solid in their starting spots, and then a lot of competition going on. What happens if K.J. Wright or Wagner get hurt? You think we're still pretty strong at linebacker?
No, I think that's the one real problem area they have. They have. I like Brock Coyle a lot. True story. He's the only player. Been doing this about 3 years now. I've been covering the Seahawks. He's the only guy I've guessed that they're going to take. I predicted they'd draft him that year. He was a UDFA, so I get a half point for that or something. But I thought he'd be a good fit for us. Only one so far, but that's better than none, I guess. But I like him. But aside from that, there's just not a lot of depth at linebacker. And you saw last year Wagner missed the Carolina game, and what happened is they just ran the ball right down our throat. Wagner's the best run stuffer, and Jonathan Stewart, he just bang, 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 went right down our throat, and they scored. That was part of the problem against them last year, that he was out in that regular season game. And that's happened before, too. Anytime Bobby misses time, Seahawks defense is just not the same, because he's the core of that team. He's the play caller. It all starts with him in a way. So they can't afford to lose him. And K.J. Wright is also just terminally underrated. It's ridiculous. He's starting to look like Luke Kuechly at times. Kuechly probably has the best instincts, I would say, in the NFL. When he knows what you're doing before you're even going to do that. And Wright's starting to get there. You see some of these screen plays. He's there before the ball is even at the running back. He knows what's coming, and he's there already. So those two are pretty indispensable. I think they've got good depth defensive line and the secondary, but linebacker, that's a little bit of a concern, yeah.
Stepping back to the secondary, last year we started off with not Cam Chancellor at safety, and then we had Terry Williams opposite Richard Sherman, which ended up being kind of a disaster in itself also. This year we look to be starting off at a pretty high level. What are your expectations from the Legion of Boom this year?
I feel a lot better about them this year. People don't talk about this, but they were all banged up last year. Cam Chancellor obviously missed training camp. He missed the preseason. He missed the first 2 games. I still think that part of his holdup was him just being banged up. I think that he wasn't ready, and he knew he wasn't physically ready. I think that was part of his decision, unfortunate as it was. But he definitely was hurting after that second Super Bowl. Earl Thomas was never 100% last year, as fantastic as he is, and he does things that nobody else in the NFL can do. But he missed a few plays last year that he would normally make, I think, because his shoulder was still hurting. And Richard Sherman was hurting, but he had another phenomenal year. I have no complaints there. The one thing you used to be able to say about Sherman, like, well, he doesn't tail guys one-on-one. That's what Patrick Peterson said, I think. You don't tail guys one-on-one, so you're not a true shutdown corner. Well, look what happens here. They start moving him around last year. He shuts down Antonio Brown, shuts down Des Bryant, and he shuts down A.J. Green all the same year. So argument over. I think they look just fine.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I was thinking, Antonio Brown, just asking. And the Steelers scored a lot of points, but Antonio Brown did not have a real good game in that game against the Seahawks last year. So, talking about a player who's not necessarily a defensive player, but he helps the defense, punter John Ryan. He has averaged over 50 yards a punt in each game this preseason so far. And even though he had a higher average last year, he had fewer kicks within the 20. It seemed like he was a little bit more inconsistent. So, assuming he's back to being the John Ryan that we all know and love, because, he has all the muscles and the calf muscles, as we all know, right? How big of an asset is he for Seattle?
I think him having an off year last year was a big part of the problem. I read this earlier today. I know a lot goes into special teams play. There's blocking and 11 guys, on both sides going either way at full speed. But apparently Ryan, when he kicked, the punt returners averaged more yards per attempt than anyone else in the NFL. So I'm not sure exactly what his problem was, but it looked like he didn't quite have the same punch on his kicks as he used to. But that's definitely not the problem so far this preseason. He's been brilliant. He's got tons of air under his kicks. He's got power. He's accurate. And the field position is really an underrated part of the game. If you can pin people the way the Seahawks did in 2013 and 2014 and just really start them way back in their own territory, that gives us such an advantage because Pete Carroll plays an aggressive defense, plays a lot of cover one. We know they're going to do a lot of cover three, but they're going to get after you, and being backed up just makes it that much harder against that defense. So it's a big thing to have him on point like he is now.
And as we saw in the last preseason game, if they need a receiver, he's right there on the sidelines to make that catch. I just loved how the crowd reacted to him catching that punt, because it was like when you're watching it, it's like, he caught the punt, or they didn't even say anything. Oh, the crowd cheers, and there's this huge cheer that he caught the kick. It's kind of, that's the great thing about Seattle fans is there's all that kind of like an in-joke kind of thing, but he caught it and the crowd went crazy. So moving on to this last preseason game on Thursday, we're not going to probably see a whole lot of the starters, if any. What do you hope to see from the last preseason game, and which do you see as the biggest position battles left?
I think the big thing is I want to see better run defense in general. The problem against Kansas City, they're a little bit better against Minnesota, but there's a problem again against Dallas. Part of that is the defensive line they've been getting beat at the line of scrimmage, so I want to see some improvement there. Spencer Ware had a pretty big game. Ezekiel Elliott again looked pretty amazing. So I want to see them really shut down Latavius Murray and DeAndre Washington, two really good backs the Raiders have. They also have a couple other guys. They're kind of an old-school running game. You think of the Raiders, you think the powerful, enormous kind of running backs that can plow through you. That's kind of what they have going on again. So I'd like to see some improvement there. As far as the position battles go, right tackle is kind of the last one. They've got every other spot set on the offensive line. Inside, I wrote an article earlier this week. They look great. They look deep. Left tackle, kind of a question mark, but it looks like Soul has that now. So it's pretty much up to Jamarcus Webb and Gary Gilliam at right tackle. So that'll be something to watch.
And Gilliam's looked pretty good, but do you think Webb could actually overtake him?
I'm not a big fan of Webb. I watched a lot of him when he was with the Bears early in his career, and he's an enormous guy. He's very big, even for NFL-sized tackle, but I think what happens to a lot of these guys when they're that big playing in high school and playing in college, they can get away with their size and their strength compensating for not having to learn certain techniques and the finer points of line play, and I think that's kind of what's happened to him. I expect Gilliam to win that battle, but as a backup, maybe in case, God forbid, Gilliam gets hurt, Webb, okay, you can put him in there, and you won't be a complete liability. Maybe not. Hopefully not.
So, next week when we're on and you join us, is there anything that worries you most, just as kind of a preview about the Miami Dolphins in that Week 1 regular season game?
Don't have a lot of fears about the Dolphins. I don't think that they have much going on. The biggest problem they may have is no depth at cornerback. Now, they got Byron Maxwell, who was with the Seahawks a while back, but he had a pretty awful year in Philadelphia. Once he got away from Sherman and then having Earl Thompson, Cam Chancellor back him up, all of a sudden he's in the NFC East and he's having to go up against the guys like Odell Beckham every week. And I think Julio Jones just had a monster game with him covering him. He was just completely helpless. They also lost Brent Grimes. I have no idea who their other starting cornerback is, so I think Wilson could have a huge game. I'm starting Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin myself on my team. I'm feeling pretty good about that matchup myself. So, the Ndamukong Suh you got to worry about. They've got to do a pretty good job of keeping him off Russell Wilson because he's one of these guys who's a little bit dirty, has a habit of stepping on people and making some dirty plays. So he's the one guy you don't want Russell Wilson to get hurt in the first game of the season. So keep Suh away, and I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I didn't have another question, but now I do for fantasy football. So I have 4 fantasy football leagues that I'm in, and we've had 2 drafts so far. I've been involved in 2 drafts, and I have intentionally drafted Tyler Lockett fairly high. Do you think that's a safe pick for my fantasy teams?
I love Lockett. I think he has just ridiculous potential for fantasy. He could easily break 10 touchdowns and 1,000 yards this year, assuming he's healthy. He's kind of a wiry guy. That's my only concern about him, really. Like Paul Richardson's kind of the same build, and he's been banged up a little bit. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. Lockett looked great his rookie season. I don't think he had any injury scares as far as I can remember. He knows how to avoid contact, especially on those returns, which are probably the deadliest play in the game. I feel great about him. I think I would draft him in. So far, I've got him on 2 of my 3 teams, and I try to get him whenever I can. You can't reach, depending on when he's available, but overall, I think he's a great pick.
Awesome. Well, that makes me feel better anyway. So, Tim, thanks again for being on. And where can people read your stuff and my stuff and the stuff on Cover32 Seahawks site?
You can find our work at cover32.com/Seahawks, and you can also find me on Twitter, still complaining about Donald Trump, at TimWeaver84.
That'll all be over soon, one can hope. So just the presidential election. Then we can move on to the real thing of second half football season. So thanks for being on. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, he brought up some good points. I mean, I guess one thing that would concern me about the Dolphins is, as Tim mentioned, the defensive line could be really good based on who they have. They have Suh, they have Wake, Mario Williams, right? Am I wrong about that? So, I guess my one concern is, and this is based on, the season last year, and then preseason game 2, which doesn't mean anything in the scope of realism. But, Wilson can be under pressure, and that group alone puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So, if the Seahawks are somehow turned into a run-only, we can't throw against the Dolphins, not because of their secondary or linebacker core, but because of all the pressure they're putting on Russell Wilson. Is that a concern for you?
Yeah, it's always a concern when you got a big defensive line coming at Russell Wilson, but Russell Wilson knows how to scramble. I mean, he showed in that clip he ran at the beginning of the show when he looked like he was going to dive down and go down, and then he turned back and looped around a couple different times and then threw a touchdown to Lockett. I mean, he can outrun a lot of those big guys. And Dominican Sue, the first thing I thought when Tim said, yeah, and Dominican Sue, I said, yeah, hey, he's going to step on your quarterback because that's, he is a right. dirty player. Every time he comes on TV, my wife goes, that guy's such a cheater. But I mean, that's always he is. And I don't think he's going to do it this early in the season. But I mean, if he can get his hands on Russell Wilson, but I don't know. It might be more of I might be more concerned about Fetty mouthing off to him and him doing something to him than I am him hurting Russell Wilson. Just sounds like Fetty's a fiery guy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, I guess it would. No, I don't even want to go down that road. I was thinking Fetty's not a small guy, and he's been in some scuff ups with even back to his college days. It would be interesting to see. I mean, that's a potential something could happen from that. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. And I guess if it happens, Fetty has more of a statement to make than Sue does if he wins that scuff up, right? That scuff up. Scuff up makes me sound like I'm 90 years old, right? It's like I remember when the Gray Ghost ran for LSU, but it was like it's one of those things where it's it would be interesting. So, the Seahawks started off last season 0-2, obviously, and they were without Cam, they were without certain things. They didn't seem to be the same Seahawks. This year, the potential is there if they can beat the Rams, who seem to be a nemesis in Los Angeles. But there's a potential there for at least a 3-0 start before they travel to New York against the Jets. Not that the Jets are the best team in the NFL, but on the road, East Coast, the Jets have a good defense. Anything can happen. There's definitely a potential for a 3-0 start. Would you be disappointed if they didn't have a 3-0 start?
Well, I'd be disappointed if they didn't beat the Dolphins for sure. And I'd think here we go again. But the Rams that's always their Super Bowl when they play the Seahawks. So you never know what's going to happen there. And they're in a new city, and they're going to have new fans behind them. And but they'll have a lot of people from St. Louis rooting against them. So we'll take those fans.
That's true.
But I guess I wouldn't be disappointed if they lost one of those games. If they started off 1-2, I'd be disappointed. But if they lose one of those games, I don't. And it'd probably be that Rams game that I'd be expecting to lose just because of the history there. Not that Jeff Fisher's this great coach, or they have this great. Yeah, they've got a pretty tough defensive line too. So we'll see.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's the first two defensive lines the Seahawks face are definitely formidable. It's interesting because it's almost the Rams have beaten the Seahawks at times when they've been less. Like you didn't really know what to expect out of the Rams offense so much. I mean, last year they started off, they lost to the Rams in that first game. It just seemed like something was off. There was no Cam. This year, now we know the Rams have Gurley, and they're going to try to run the ball against the Seahawks. And the Rams do have that great defensive line, and they're going to start a rookie quarterback. So it's almost they're more conventional than they have been. I almost think that maybe plays a little bit more into the Seahawks' hands instead of, well, we know the Rams are just going to be weird. They're going to run these fake punts and fake kicks and whatever. And maybe they're a little less apt to do that with the team they have constructed currently. So, I think that if anything, obviously, is that their first home game? Is it the Rams' first home game of the season? Is that their first game in as far as regular season? I'm currently looking it up. So they play the 49ers at home, the 49ers in San Francisco, that first game. So that's their first home game in Los Angeles this season. I don't know what that means. A first home game in Los Angeles. A lot of fans are going to turn out in Los Angeles who haven't seen NFL football in a long time, at least in Los Angeles. Is it more? Maybe it's more of a novelty thing to them. Hey, look, we got the Rams. They're in Los Angeles. Maybe they're not they're definitely not going to be Seattle fans, but they're probably not even St. Louis fans, right? Where they turn out and they root for their team fervently. That home base, even though the fans may turn out, maybe it's not as huge of a home field advantage for the Rams. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you were talking, I'm thinking, I wonder if any of those Los Angeles fans, certainly they all didn't become 49er fans. Maybe some of them became Charger fans. Maybe there's some Seattle fans. I don't know. They might be. I just think they're gonna have problems with that Seattle defense. I got pretty high hopes for that defense this year, and I don't. With a rookie quarterback back there, good luck to you.
Yeah, I guess my hope is that, again, going into last season, Earl Thomas had missed the entire preseason. There was no Cam Chancellor. We had Kerry Williams. I'm on the team. I'm a Seahawks fan, had Kerry Williams as the other corner on the team. This team, other than the Mike Morgan, and Mike Morgan might be a fine player. Who knows? I don't want to discard him, but it seems like a downgrade from Irving. But based on the defensive line depth, the talent on the defensive line, what they have in the Legion of Boom currently, it seems like this team may be a little bit more mentally ready going into 2016 than they were 2015, and maybe they've got that chip back on their shoulder, and I think that helps them not only early in the season, but especially against the Rams team, who has had their number, seems like half the time, right?
Yeah, and Tim made some good points about them being banged up last year. I really didn't even think about that, but as he's going through it, I'm thinking, you know what, he's right. Every one of those players was banged up, and Jeremy Lane missed almost the whole season. And, I tell you what, I've been very impressed with that defensive backfield this preseason. Again, it's just preseason, but there's a lot of guys back there that can play that position. And, Jeremy Lane, I think Deshaun Shed's earned his spot at that cornerback position. And, I think they are a lot healthier than they have been over the last year, or going into last year. So that I didn't even think about that until Tim brought it up. So I'm glad he did, because I started thinking, yeah, they were banged up. That's right. And then the fact that maybe Cam held out because he wasn't healthy enough. Well, he gave up a lot of money for not be healthy.
I don't even think Cam had his best season last year. So maybe even that set alone, he comes in with a bit more of I've got something to prove, But Jeremy Lane over Kerry Williams at this point, that seems like a no-brainer. When Lane came back, and like you said, he missed like a whole bunch of the season, almost most of the season last year. When he came back, not only was there no Williams playing anymore, but when Lane made a huge difference, and I've probably mentioned it on this show, I'm sure I have, but, and not going back to that Super Bowl, Wilson did throw the pass. It was a bad play call, yada, yada, yada. If Lane doesn't go out of that game, I think the Seahawks win that game. He'd already made an interception. He made a difference covering the nickel in that position that he didn't. I think Lane is a legitimate, very good defensive back. Is he an all-pro every year? Probably not, but he doesn't have to be in that defense, right? He doesn't have to be the best cornerback. He doesn't have to be the best nickel guy. He just has to be one of the four, one of the five, and I think he fits that role very well, and I thought he made a huge difference when he did come back, along with Shed, like you mentioned.
I agree 100%. He's a not great, but he's a very good cornerback. and he's earned his spot on this team.
Yeah, and then again, it goes back to putting pressure on the quarterback. The Seahawks didn't do it as well as they had in previous seasons. I think that, going into this season, Bennett's there, Avrill's there, Frank Clark now has a whole season under his belt. He's going to be more prepared, and I think people expect more, and I think he's shown that he can do more. And I think they have run stoppers in there. I think everything except for the linebacker group, besides Wright and Wagner, and I don't even think Wright had his best season last year, but I think everything lines up for this to be, on paper, the best defense they've had since 2013. And I think, hopefully, them playing with the chip on their shoulder that they may not have started off last season is going to make a huge difference. So we actually are joined at this point by Stephen Cohen of Seattle PI. Kevin, tell us a little bit about our fabulous guest.
Yeah, we'd like to welcome back Stephen Cohen from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer back to the show. Stephen, thanks for being on again. How you doing this week?
I'm good, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing pretty good. Now, the Seahawks, like everybody else, they cut down their roster today. What surprises were there for you from today's moves?
Really none. I think the guys who left today were, I think we all pretty much widely anticipated that happening. I guess if we hadn't not seen him in practice the last couple of days, Patrick Lewis would be, fairly surprising just because he started nine games last year. And Brandon Browner before that would have been a little bit surprising, although he was kind of so thoroughly buried in that defensive backfield depth chart that I don't think there were really any super huge surprises here. I mean, I guess, they cut a draft pick, 7th-round pick, Zach Brooks, which I guess is mildly surprising, but I think anybody who'd been paying attention to the running back rotation there pretty much knew that he was right at the bottom there. So nothing too surprising, actually, kind of all going according to script so far.
Yeah, that cutting Brandon Browner hurt my heart more than anything. What are some of the most positive things you've seen come out of the preseason so far, and then also what are some of the most negative?
I think the offensive line is obviously the position group that's generated the most, I guess, ink spilt over the last few months here because everybody's worried that they're going to be really, really a weak point on the team. But I think for the most part they've held up okay, particularly the interior of the line where you've got Justin Britt at center and then Jermaine Ifedi and Mark Lewinsky at guards. Those three seem to look really solid. They seem to play well together. They seem to be opening up holes in the running game and then doing well enough in the passing game. I think Britt was a huge question mark coming in, how he would adjust to being a center, but he's really sort of taken to the role, and they may have found a long-term solution there for him. As far as something that's not done as well as expected, I think the run defense is concerning. I think even if you take away last week against the Cowboys, who are one of the top running teams in the NFL, just the contain on the edge hasn't been really good. We haven't seen, I think, the stout kind of interior run defense that we're used to seeing, with a couple of exceptions from a guy like Jaron Reed, who is dealing with an injury now. But a player like Frank Clark, who is expected to play a big role, got kind of manhandled in the running game against the Cowboys there, and you don't want to see that. And it's just preseason; we won't overreact to it, but. The run defense, people talk about the secondary and what the Seahawks do against a passing team in the passing game, but what they do is really predicated on stopping the run. They have to do that to be successful. And so the fact they haven't done that yet is a little surprising, but again, they're not showing a lot. They're playing pretty vanilla, and we'll see what happens when the regular season comes around.
Does it concern you at all that Mike Morgan is that third linebacker, and maybe that's not helping as much in run support?
I think it's a good point. Morgan's not, Morgan's been around for a long time, and you would think that he could kind of come in and just hold the fort down a little bit. But I think more than anything, you're seeing Bruce Irvin was a really good player all around. not just a pass rusher. He didn't maybe get to the quarterback as much as people would have liked to have seen at times, but he developed into a really nice all-around linebacker. He could drop into coverage. He had a couple of interceptions when he returned for a touchdown a couple of years ago, I think, or maybe that was last year. He could rush the passer, and then he could also set the edge. I think what you're seeing with Morgan is a guy who's solid but is not as dynamic an athlete as Bruce Irvin, and Bruce put up huge numbers or anything like that, but he just fit what they did really well. He turned into a player who really fit what they did. So I don't think he's going to be a disaster or anything like that. I think a guy like Cassius Marsh actually has some real upside as far as being a first and second down defender at that position. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ended up seeing increased reps as the season went on, setting the edge and rushing the passer from that spot, and then maybe coming off when it was time to drop into coverage or something like that. But I think they'll be okay there. It might be something that bears watching, moving forward, though, because it is a spot where they haven't had a lot of turnover in the last couple of years, as they do this year.
And again, we're talking to Stephen Cohen of Seattle PI. So if Russell Wilson were to be injured, how confident, and that would be worst case scenario, but I think we've been pretty lucky Russell Wilson has been as healthy as he has been. But how confident would you be that the Seahawks could still make the playoffs with, assuming Trayvon Boykin is the backup at quarterback?
I would not feel confident about that. I would say if Russell Wilson is out for an extended period of time, you're looking at a team that will have a hard time winning games consistently, particularly because the division's tough. The Rams match up well with the Seahawks all the time. The Cardinals are probably one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the league. 49ers are the 49ers, but they always play tough too. I just don't see it. I think Trayvon Boykin is very raw. There are some things you like about his game. You like his mobility. You like the fact that he's starting to take command of the offense. He doesn't throw very accurately. He doesn't throw downfield particularly accurately yet. And he's just not proven anything, I don't think. I think we've seen him make a couple of plays and a couple of nice drives here at the end of preseason games, but I think if you're thinking he can go and kind of replicate the effort of Russell Wilson, or at least, not make enough mistakes to beat you, I think that might be asking a little bit too much of him. In this hypothetical scenario, you'd think they would run or really lean heavily on the run game there in order to make up for it, and that might help. But I just, I don't know. I don't see. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a veteran brought in the next few days as teams cut down, because I think that going into a season that actually has Super Bowl hopes with Trayvon Boykin as your only backup at the position is potentially pretty dicey.
And by bringing in a veteran, would you be surprised that it would be like Michael Vick or bringing in Tavares Jackson?
I don't know from a PR standpoint if they can bring in Tavares Jackson. He didn't get charges pressed from the domestic violence incident over the summer, but it was if you read the police report, it wasn't good. It wasn't a good incident. And I don't know that they would be looking to do that, even though he's a guy that they have liked and that has been a popular guy here, popular in the locker room. I just think after last season's drafting of Frank Clark and all the blowback they got there, it would be a really tough sell for the fan base. And I don't know about Michael Vick either. Michael Vick, I think if they were going to really look at him, they probably would have brought him in by now. I don't know. I think they're probably waiting to see who gets cast off from the other teams in the league as they're making their final cuts here. And you'd be more likely to see somebody like that who's coming off of a team who's been in a system, who's been playing over the summer here. And, even then you've got a guy who hasn't played in the Seahawks system. Is they're going to have to try to come in and adjust to a brand new offense. And so it's pretty dicey. The whole situation with the backup quarterback is pretty dicey, but I'm not convinced that they are sold on Trayvon Boykin as the answer.
And that's a great answer. So, we talked a little bit before you were on as far as especially the secondary in 2016 heading into 2015, how much more, I think the talent is much better going into this season. But how confident are you in the team overall going into 2016 compared to 2015 that the Seahawks can make a deep run in the playoffs, make the Super Bowl again?
I think fans should be as confident as they've been in the last couple of years. They've got a lot of talent. They are really deep in some spots. We just talked about the quarterback, and it seemed scary thin there. But in a lot of the spots, they're really deep. They're deep at running back. They're deep at wide receiver. Regardless of what you think about the offensive line, they've got several guys who I think they would feel comfortable putting out there if they needed to play them. They're pretty deep in the secondary. So they've got a lot of players here who are top-notch NFL players. You got your stars, obviously, your Shermans, your Earl Thomases, your Michael Bennett's on defense. And then you just got guys who make sense for this team as far as filling out the roster, the guys you always need in like a Super Bowl run, like a guy like Kelsey McRae comes to mind. So I think Seahawks fans should be excited. I think this is going to be a tough division. Like I said before, the Cardinals, I think, are probably the favorite in the division here, but the Seahawks should be right there behind them. And then, among the top 3-4 teams in the NFC as far as trying to get to the Super Bowl. So I wouldn't be surprised if they made another run like that at all.
And Steve, as far as the offensive line, they were horrible the first half of last year, obviously, and they did improve as the season went on. And the Seahawks obviously agreed with that, and everybody's analysis on that, and made a lot of changes this year in the offensive line. Do you think this year's unit will be better, or should we expect them to start off a little slow and maybe be better later on in the season like last year?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine at this point. I do think that because the interior seems to have solidified a little bit, and, you forget last year they had a project at center. Drew Nowak was a guy who nobody really knew anything about, and they converted college defender who they liked his athleticism, and that was a real, I think, test in Tom Cable's ability to teach on the fly and get these guys to do just enough to win games before they kind of, gelled into a unit, and that just never happened. So they went to Patrick Lewis, who's now no longer part of the team. And Patrick Lewis is, I don't think, a spectacular player by any means, but he was good enough to just kind of hold down the fort. And the line got a lot better. I think you will see improvement as the year goes on, but you still have a guy like Bradley Sowell at left tackle who is, I guess would kindly be described as a journeyman. But in Arizona, they were really not impressed with him. They were, I think he started a game in the last 2.5 years or something like that. And so that's got to be a huge question mark. The right tackle spot is a huge question mark. I think Gary Gilliam is one of the most disappointing players in training camp and the preseason easily. He was a guy who you thought would maybe ascend and maybe even profile better as a left tackle than a right tackle because of his athleticism, but he just really hasn't put it together. It doesn't seem like it has a very tenuous hold on that right tackle job. It might get beat out by a guy like Jamarcus Webb. So, I think they'll be okay in the middle. I don't know how they're going to be outside. I think you will see progression, but, it's going to be interesting to see how Russell Wilson handles pressure these first few weeks, because I do think that probably you'll see teams bring a lot of pressure and see if the Seahawks can pick it up.
And let's hope they can. Hopefully with that quick wide receivers, they can get downfield and get open. And Steve, we seem to have a bit of a Frank Clark motif going on tonight's show. We're talking a lot about him. What do you expect from him this year, and then what do you expect from him going into the future?
To me, the jury's still out with him. It was a little bit disconcerting, I think, if you're a Seahawks fan, to watch him against the run in the last game. And again, that's a top-notch line with Dallas, but he really got buried on a couple of runs where he needed to have contained, and he just couldn't hack it. So I think that, everybody's excited about his potential as a pass rusher, and that's I think his strongest suit. But you have to get on the field somehow, and if you can't play against the run, or you're a liability against the run, you're not going to be on the field nearly enough to make an impact. And so, I think we'll probably see him rotate in at passing downs at first, but what I would like to see from him is develop to the point where he's kind of in that rotation at defensive end, kicking Michael Bennett inside, and he's on there and can actually show some some ability as a run stopper. And if that's the case, then he could be, a long-time contributor for this team. But he does show flashes where he just shows that athleticism, and you say, wow, this guy could be something really special. And he does that in practice too, where he'll just blow by a guy. So I guess for Seahawks fans, hopefully what happens with him is he starts to turn those flashes into production. He starts finishing plays. He gets sacks, he gets tackles for losses, he gets quarterback hits, and then he can continue to become a little bit more stout against the run moving forward. And then, then you've got a long-time contributor. I don't know that he'll ever be a star necessarily. He might be, but I think that you have a guy who could have a nice long career in the league.
So, moving beyond the Seahawks just a little bit, there were several teams out there in the NFC who may be a big challenge to the Seahawks getting to the Super Bowl. Of course, the Packers, the Vikings are good, the Cardinals. How much of a blow is it that Teddy Bridgewater may be out for an extended period of time for the Vikings?
Yeah, that's a real bummer. I think the Vikings were sort of my under the radar Super Bowl pick from the NFC, and I just really like what they've done on defense. I think they have, like the Seahawks, they've got players at each level who are just stars and really, really good players. And they just kind of needed to figure out their offensive identity a little bit more. They got some weapons from Teddy Bridgewater. They brought in Laquan Treadwell, the wide receiver, and it seemed like he was going to be, he was coming along slowly, but maybe if he could come along, he could be another target in the passing game. They've obviously got Adrian Peterson and a good offensive line, and now with him out, I don't know where they got Sean Hill. I guess it's their starting quarterback for the year now. It doesn't do anything for me. So it's a bummer to see injuries at this late stage of the preseason, because we're so close to getting the regular season started, and this could have happened at any time. And I guess this was a non-contact injury, so it's a fluky thing. But man, you hate to see that for Vikings fans. I know they must be going through it. And I do feel a little bit, not upset exactly, but I'm disappointed that I won't get to see that team kind of at full strength. I think they would have been fun to watch this year.
So that kind of leads me to my last question for you, which is preseason game 4. Game 3 is preseason game 3 is kind of like, okay, we're going to see a lot of the starters. Is there any point in having preseason game 4? I mean, what do we learn from that, really?
Well, if you talk to the coaches, they will tell you it's very important for those guys really at the bottom of the roster. But I think they would somehow make do if they eliminated that 4th preseason game. You do see guys who occasionally will make a final push, and they'll end up making a team and making an impact with this. But it's tough because not only do you go into a game and you have to just get through the game, you've got 15 fewer players than you had the rest of the preseason. You've had to shed 15 players. So some of the teams are going to have to play starters or key backups way later into the game than they normally would, just because they have to feel the team. They have to get through it. So it doesn't make sense on a lot of levels. It's one of those weird rules that we're still hanging on to, and coaches say they love it, but I think secretly if you polled them all, they would say they would be fine getting rid of the 1 preseason game, if not 2, frankly.
Right, yeah, maybe they get – it's almost like, well, we get paid, so we have to say we like this because the NFL's making money off this maybe. But, Stephen – you've been nice enough to be on several times with us. I don't know that we're worthy, but we do really appreciate you being on. Where can people find your writings and find you on social media?
They can follow me on Twitter. It's at SCohenPI, so it's at SCOHENPI. And all my stuff is on SeattlePI.com. And, yeah, those are the best places to find me. And I do actually have my own podcast now. It's called the Seahawks Sideline Podcast, and that's coming out a couple times a week, and they can find that on my Twitter feed as well.
Awesome. I'm really glad you mentioned that because I actually have checked it out. It's fantastic. So anybody who hasn't listened to that should definitely listen to that. So, yeah, it's great. I didn't. I thought, well, has this been on before? And then I listened to it, and I was like, this seems new. It's fantastic. So definitely anybody listening should check that out as well. But, Stephen, thanks again for being on. And, of course, we'll probably ask you, and hopefully you can be on during the regular season as well.
Sure thing. Sounds good, guys.
Thank you. So, Kevin, we should mention we have had Seattle Miss players on the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, they lost by a point in the Legends Cup, which is a shame. And you sent me a photo of Danica's ankle, which looked horrible.
That was bad.
So, did she injure it again in the game, or was that the injury she had prior to the game, in the previous game?
I think she had another injury prior to the game, because when they showed her, there's a couple of Instagram pictures, and she was taped up all around her waist and down her the top of her right leg too. So I don't know if she had an injury going. And I don't know that ankle was that may have been injured before, but that was ugly.
Yeah, I know she mentioned she was injured in that previous game against Chicago, but I don't remember seeing that photo. But that looked horrible. But we're sad to miss loss. We're thankful that KK and Danica could be on, and hopefully we'll have them on again. And of course tonight, we're thankful that Tim Weaver can always be on, and he's allowing us to be a part of Cover 32. And then David Stobbe of being on from 12th Man Rising, and Stephen Cohen of Seattle PI. So Kevin, as always, any final words? And then you have the final 2 words. So go for it.
I'm just looking forward to a successful Seahawks season, and go Hawks.
3rd down and 4 from the 9. Seattle leading 13-10. Wilson out of the shotgun, pro-side. Curtis slotted on the left side. Lockett wide to the near side. Russell looking. Russell scrambling. Pump faking. Still looking. Now he spins out. He's coming to the right. Still looking for somebody to open up. Pump fake. He throws to the end zone. It's a touchdown. Touchdown Seahawks to Tyler Lockett, who just kept moving around. Ryan Russell was chasing Russell Wilson all over the backfield. A 9-yard touchdown pass. The Seahawks finally pay it off.
When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.